Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gavel hit the wood with a sound like a breaking bone, finalizing the end of my life as a human being and the beginning of my existence as property. Sold to the sovereign of the Northern Territories for the sum of 3 million gold pieces and the surrender of the Iron Valley mines. The auctioneer's voice was too cheerful, a sharp contrast to the suffocating dread that constricted my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to howl until my lungs bled, to curse the father who sat in the velvet box above, sipping wine with a smile on his face. But the curse of my birthright denied me even that small mercy. I opened my mouth, but only a ragged, hollow breath escaped. Silence. It was the cage I had been born into, and now, it was the reason I was kneeling on the cold stone of the slave block, shivering not from the draft, but from the terrifying presence of the man walking toward me. The crowd, usually raucous and jeering, fell deathly silent. They parted like the Red Sea, their faces pale, eyes averted. Heavy boots echoed against the marble floor, asterisk thud, thud, thud asterisk, a rhythm of approaching doom. I dared to look up through the veil of my messy, silver hair. He was a titan. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the empires he had crushed. He wore the military regalia of the North, black wool, silver fox fur, and leather armor that creaked with his movements. But it was his eyes that froze the blood in my veins. They were gold, not the color of coins, but the color of a predator staring at prey in the split second before the kill. This was Kalen Draxos, the Wolf King, the alpha of alphas. He stopped in front of me. The scent hit me then, a wave of pine, frozen earth, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. It was overwhelming, triggering a primal instinct in my brain to bare my neck and submit. Kalen didn't speak to the auctioneer. He didn't look at my father, Count Vane, who was now bowing frantically from the balcony. He only looked at me. He reached out a hand clad in a black leather glove. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, expecting a blow. That was what hands were for. My father's hands, my stepmother's hands. They were instruments of correction for the mute defect. But the blow never came. Instead, a finger, rough and warm even through the leather, hooked under my chin and forced my head up. "Open your eyes," Kalen commanded. His voice was a low rumble, vibrating in my chest. I obeyed. I stared into the molten gold, trembling uncontrollably. "They say you are broken," Kalen said, his voice devoid of pity, yet lacking the cruelty I was used to. "They say you have no voice to beg for your life." I couldn't answer. I could only stare, tears welling in my eyes. "Good," the Wolf King murmured, his thumb brushing away a tear that escaped. "I have grown tired of screams. Perhaps your silence will be the only peace I find." He didn't wait for a handler. He grabbed the chain connecting my manacles and jerked it, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to command. "Come, little ghost. We are going home." The journey to the Northern Territories took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being locked in a carriage that smelled of cedar and expensive tobacco. 3 weeks of wondering when the torture would begin. My name is Elian. I was the second son of Count Vane, a man obsessed with lineage and perfection. When I was born without a voice, a rare genetic quirk in a world where oratorical skill was tied to magic, I was labeled a stain on the family honor. My childhood was a blur of physicians, magical healers, and when they failed, punishments. "If you cannot speak, you must be useful in other ways," my stepmother would hiss, handing me a scrubbing brush while her own children played in the gardens. I became a servant in my own house. And when the debts piled up, I became currency. Now, I sat in the heart of the Wolf King's territory. The castle of Obsidio was carved directly into the side of a black mountain. It was a fortress of jagged spires and looming gargoyles, perpetually dusted with snow. I was led not to a dungeon, but to a room. It was vast, with a 4-poster bed draped in heavy furs, a roaring fireplace, and a balcony overlooking a frozen lake. "You will stay here." I spun around. Kalen was standing in the doorway. He had removed his armor, wearing only a loose white shirt and black trousers. The informality made him look even more dangerous, highlighting the corded muscle of his chest and arms. I gestured frantically to myself, then to the room, then to the door. Asterisk me? Here? Why? Asterisk. Kalen leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. I do not speak hand-waving, boy. If you wish to communicate, there is paper on the desk. I rushed to the desk, grabbing a quill with shaking hands. I scribbled furiously and held up the parchment. Asterisk, why am I not in the cells? I am a slave. Asterisk. Kalen's eyes narrowed. He walked into the room, the air pressure seeming to drop with his proximity. He took the paper from my hand, reading it slowly. You are my property, he said, his gaze locking onto mine. And I do not keep my property in dungeons where it can rust or rot. You will live here. You will be clean. You will be fed. And when I call for you, you will come. He stepped closer, backing me against the heavy oak desk. He placed a hand on the wood on either side of me, trapping me. Do you understand? I nodded, my breath hitching. Are you afraid of me, Elian? I paused. Was I? Yes. He was a killer. A monster. But he hadn't hit me. He had fed me. He had given me a room warmer than any I had known in my father's estate. I picked up the quill again, my hand trembling as I wrote a single word. Yes. Kalen looked at the word, then back at me. A strange expression crossed his face, something like satisfaction mixed with irritation. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Keep fearing me, little ghost. It is safer than the alternative. With that, he turned and left, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. I sank to the floor, clutching my chest, trying to calm the erratic beating of my heart. Why did he look at me like that? Like he was starving, and I was the only meal in the world? Weeks turned into months. The routine at Obsidia was monotonous but peaceful. I was given chores, organizing the library, tending to the winter gardens, but they were light compared to the labor at my father's house. The staff ignored me mostly. They were werewolves, robust and loud, and they viewed me, a mute human, as a curiosity at best and a mistake at worst. The king is mad. I heard a maid whisper one day as I polished silver in the dining hall. Bringing a defective human here? He smells weak. He smells nice, though, another guard muttered. Like rain. Careful, the maid snapped. The king hasn't marked him, but he reeks of Kalen's scent. You touch him, you lose a hand. I froze. Kalen's scent. I sniffed my sleeve. I smelled like soap and the lavender sachets in the wardrobe. I didn't understand the complex olfactory language of the wolves. But I did understand that Kalen was watching me. He was always there. When I was in the library, I would feel eyes on me and look up to see him standing on the mezzanine, a glass of dark wine in his hand, watching. When I walked in the garden, he would be on the balcony above. We rarely interacted. Until the night of the winter solstice. The castle was thrown into chaos for the grand feast. Lords and ladies from neighboring territories arrived, bringing with them noise, politics, and danger. I was ordered to serve wine at the high table, a task usually reserved for favored servants, not slaves. I tried to refuse. I wrote to the head steward that I would drop things, that I was clumsy. He burned the note and shoved a velvet tunic into my hands. The king requested you specifically. Do not embarrass him. The great hall was a sea of furs, jewels, and bared teeth. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and heavy musk. I moved like a shadow, pouring wine, keeping my eyes on the floor. I reached the high table. Kalen sat on a throne carved from obsidian, looking bored and lethal. He was wearing a crown of iron, his black hair slicked back. To his right sat a woman, Lady Seraphina of the Eastern clans. She was beautiful, sharp, and clearly interested in the king. More wine, she commanded, snapping her fingers without looking at me. I stepped forward, the heavy pitcher trembling in my hands. As I poured, Seraphina shifted suddenly, laughing at a joke from another lord. Her elbow knocked my arm. The pitcher slipped. Red wine cascaded over the white tablecloth, splashing onto Seraphina's silk dress. The hall went silent. You clumsy wretch! Seraphina shrieked, jumping up. Her face twisted into a snarl, her eyes flashing yellow. Do you know how much this silk costs? I dropped to my knees, grabbing a napkin, frantically trying to dab at the stain. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Seraphina kicked me. Her boot connected with my ribs, sending a shock of pain through my side. I gasped, curling into a ball. Get away from me, she yelled, raising her hand. Claws extending from her manicured fingertips. I'll teach you a lesson in respect, human trash. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the pain. Crack. The sound was loud, like a whip. But I felt nothing. I opened my eyes. Kalen was standing over me. He had caught Serafina's wrist in midair. His grip was tight enough that I could see the bones in her arm straining. Kalen. Serafina stammered, her anger instantly replaced by fear. You are a guest in my home, Serafina, Kalen said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. But you seem to have forgotten the laws of hospitality. He ruined my dress, she cried, pointing at me with her free hand. He is just a slave? A mute, useless thing. Kalen's eyes flared. The gold in them swirled with darkness. He twisted her wrist, forcing her to her knees until she was level with me. He, Kalen growled, is mine. The possessiveness in that single word sent a shockwave through the room. And no one, Kalen continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried to every corner of the silent hall, touches what is mine. He released her with a shove. Serafina scrambled back, clutching her wrist, her face pale. Kalen turned to me. The rage vanished from his face, replaced by an intensity that burned. He reached down, offering me his hand. I stared at it. The hand of a monster. The hand of my savior. I took it. He pulled me up effortlessly. Then, in front of the entire court, in front of the visiting dignitaries and his own soldiers, he did the unthinkable. He lifted his hand to my face, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, checking for bruises. Are you hurt? He asked softly. I shook my head, mesmerized. Go to my chambers, he commanded. Wait for me there. The king's chambers were a sanctuary I had never entered. They smelled entirely of him, that intoxicating mix of pine and storm. I sat on the edge of the massive bed, my ribs throbbing, my mind racing. He is mine. What did that mean? Was I a possession? A pet? Or something else? The door opened an hour later. Kalen entered. He looked exhausted. He had shed the crown and the heavy fur cloak. He walked straight to the wet bar, poured a glass of amber liquid, and downed it in one swallow. Then he turned to me. Let me see your side. I hesitated. Elian, he warned. I slowly lifted the hem of the velvet tunic. A dark purple bruise was already forming where Serafina had kicked me. Kalen hissed, a low, animalistic sound. He walked over, kneeling on the floor between my legs. The king of the north, kneeling before a slave. He dipped a cloth into a bowl of cool water on the nightstand and pressed it gently against my skin. I flinched. I am not going to hurt you, he murmured, his eyes focused on the bruise. I should have ripped her throat out. I reached out, my fingers hovering over his hair. I wanted to touch him. I wanted to thank him. He froze. Then, slowly, he leaned into my hand. Do you know why I bought you, Elian? He asked, his voice rough. I shook my head. Because the moment you walked onto that block, I couldn't breathe. He looked up at me, his eyes raw and vulnerable. My wolf went insane. It recognized you. A mute, fragile human. My mate. My breath hitched. Mate, the concept was a fairy tale. Soulmates. Two halves of a whole. But for a wolf king to be mated to a human? It was unheard of. It was political suicide. I tried to deny it, Kalen admitted, resting his forehead against my stomach. I told myself I bought you to mock your father. To show the world I could keep a useless thing as a luxury. But I lied. I bought you because the thought of another man touching you. It made me want to burn the world down. He looked up, his expression fierce. I hate it. I hate that you are my weakness. But I cannot change it. You are the only thing in this world that quiets the noise in my head. He took my hand and pressed it to his chest, right over his heart. It was beating steadily, a powerful rhythm. Speak to me, Elian, he whispered. Not with words. But tell me, do you hate me? I looked at him. This man who had saved me from hell, who had humiliated a noble for me, who was kneeling at my feet. I moved my hand from his chest to his lips. I traced the shape of them. Then, I leaned down and pressed my forehead against his. No, I mouthed against his skin. Kalen let out a shuddering breath. He wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face in my lap. And for the first time in my life, the silence wasn't a cage. It was a cocoon, wrapping us together, safe from the cold world outside. Peace, however, is fragile when you are surrounded by wolves. 2 months later, my pass came knocking. Count Vane arrived at Obsidia under the guise of a trade negotiation. But everyone knew why he was there. Rumors had spread. The The Wolf King had a weakness. A human pet. And Count Vane wanted to leverage his son for a better price on the iron ore. I was in the library when the door slammed open. I expected Kalen. Instead, I saw my father. He looked older, haggard, but his eyes held the same malicious gleam. "Look at you," he sneered, closing the door. "Dressed in silks. Reading books. You think you're royalty now?" I backed away, the old terror seizing my limbs. My throat constricted. "You're nothing," Vane spat, advancing on me. "You're a defective mute. And you're going to do exactly what I tell you. You're going to steal the seal from the king's desk tonight. If you don't," he pulled a dagger from his belt, "I'll finish what nature started and cut that useless tongue out of your head." I hit the bookshelf behind me. There was nowhere to run. Vane lunged. He grabbed me by the hair, yanking my head back. The blade pressed against my throat. "Not if you understand, you little rat." I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the trauma of 20 years. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library exploded inward. Splinters of wood rained down like confetti. Kalen stood in the wreckage. He wasn't human anymore. His eyes were entirely black. His canines were extended. Claws had burst through his gloves. The aura of killing intent was so heavy it felt like gravity had doubled. "Let him go." The voice wasn't human either. It was a demonic growl that shook the foundations of the castle. Vane trembled, but he held the knife tighter. "Stay back, or I'll kill him. He's my son. I have the right." "He is not your son," Kalen roared. In a blur of motion, Kalen crossed the room. Vane didn't even have time to scream. Kalen's hand clamped around Vane's throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. The knife clattered to the floor. "You sold him," Kalen snarled, bringing Vane's face close to his own. "You took coin for his flesh. You forfeited all rights. He is not a Vane anymore. He is a Valerius. He is the consort of the High King." Vane choked, his face turning purple. "He is mute. And yet," Kalen whispered, tightening his grip, "he speaks to my soul more clearly than you ever could." Kalen threw him. Vane flew across the room, crashing through a glass display case and landing in a heap, unconscious and broken. Kalen stood there, chest heaving, fighting the urge to tear the man apart. He turned to me. The darkness in his eyes receded, leaving only panic. "Elian." I was sliding down the bookshelf, shaking. He was there in an instant, gathering me into his arms. I'm here. I'm here. Look at me." He crushed me against his chest, shielding me from the sight of my father. "He will never touch you again," Kalen vowed into my hair. "I will strip him of his titles. I will burn his estate. No one will ever hurt you again." I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of pine and blood. I felt safe. For the first time, truly, completely safe. I pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say the words that had been locked in my chest for months. I opened my mouth. I forced air through vocal cords that had atrophied from disuse. It hurt. It felt like swallowing glass. "K. Kalen froze. His eyes went wide. "Kalen." It was a broken, raspy whisper. Ugly and cracked. But to Kalen, it seemed to be the most beautiful sound in the universe. Tears, actual tears, spilled from the Wolf King's eyes. "Say it again," he pleaded, cupping my face. "Kalen." He kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, a seal upon a promise. It tasted of salt and iron and forever. And that is how the mute boy tamed the Wolf King. Not with chains, but with a silence that spoke louder than any roar. If you enjoyed seeing Kalen destroy everyone who touched his mate, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a family that sold you? Or would you let the Wolf King hunt them down? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, yaoi, man 1. Tall muscular alpha male, black hair slicked back, glowing gold eyes, wearing unbuttoned black shirt, protective expression, holding man 2 close, man 2. Smaller, slender, silver hair, pale skin, teary eyes, wearing white silk shirt, submissive but safe, leaning against man 1's chest. Background is destroyed library, shattered glass on floor, dark moody lighting. Cinematic composition, emotional atmosphere, sharp focus, intricate details.